Thank you all so much for coming, and I'd like to welcome you all to our third State Crime Seminar of the term. My name is Sat Kesem, and I am a doctoral researcher here at the International State Crime Initiative. I'm particularly delighted to welcome David Miller, who is with us today from the University of Bath, whose talk today is going to investigate questions revolving around the state, Islamophobia, and the problems of researching terrorism and extremism, particularly looking at questions about how it's sabotaged, and also about how the state deepens Islamophobia. David is a director at Public Interest Investigations, which is Spinwatch, and his research looks at the communication and constitution and reproduction of knowledge in power relations. He's widely known for looking at questions related to propaganda, spin, lobbying, and exposing political corruption. So please join me in welcoming David Miller. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I'm very pleased to be here. I think that given the topic of my talk today, I'm pleased because there are things that we need to do to defend the possibility to do research, and that the State Crime Initiative is a good place to build alliances and the possibility of collective action amongst academics and researchers to defend the possibilities of doing research and to defend freedom of speech and academic freedom on campus, which are themselves under threat. So I'm pleased to be here for those reasons. I suppose that indicates something of the normative position that I take, that I don't think that I'm here just to investigate the world to find out how it works, although that is, of course, what we should be doing, since there is a world out there to investigate. But also, I think that it's unavoidable for one to take a position on how the world should work, and in this specific case of this talk, on how academics should go about doing research, should try and carve out a space for the independence of research, and should try and push back against those influences which constrain and undermine their ability and their freedom to do engage social science research. So I suppose that's my kind of disclaimer at the front. I notice also, given what I'm going to talk about and the question of ethics in research, that we are now recording this. I have been asked for permission to record this, and I gave my permission. But it's interesting, isn't it, that in a law school, that we're only at the stage of saying, is it okay to film? And I go, yeah, that's fine. Whereas I would have thought that perhaps that you might have been concerned about the Data Protection Act and consent forms, all the things which ethics committees in universities normally require one to think about. Now, of course, that I'm not criticising you, I'm just raising this as an issue, because that, of course, is one of the ways in which we experience ethics committees, the intrusive nature of ethics committees, which make things harder for us. But I suppose one of the things I want to do today is to say, well, actually, ethics is an issue which we shouldn't just be concerned about pushing back from us, but actually engaging with, since there's a lot of unethical research out there, which is part of the problem constraining us from doing independent research. So I put it out there. We should be owning ethics much more than we do Right, so anyhow, right, so we're in a new phase of the war on terror, the Terrorism and Security Act of 2015. Puts us into a new phase of the war on terror. Muslim school children as young as 3 and 4 in schools and in nurseries are suffering a backlash of abuse, according to teaching unions. 400 children as young as 3 years old have been referred to the government's Channel de-radicalisation programme since 2014. 400 children. 2,015 referrals were made to Channel in the first 5 months of last year. A total of 6,306 were referred in the previous period since it was established, from 2017 to 2015. So we can see there's there's a definite ramping up of referrals to China, of this de-radicalisation process, which comes in particular with the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act, which makes it the duty for all public institutions to try and prevent people being drawn into terrorism, whatever that might mean. The Charity Commission has named 55 British charities with a new code of extremism and radicalisation, again, an indication of the way in which, in particular, Muslim charities are being targeted from operating under another indication of the generalised assault on the role of Muslims in public life, which we see with the counter-terrorism apparatus. And a range of Muslim organisations and individuals have had their bank accounts shut down partly as a result of the Charity Commission and a number of other processes which have led to that. And I've put, as you can see in there, I've put in there, and their children with an exclamation mark. So we should remember that the bank accounts of children have been shut down because of the presumed misdeeds of their parents. So that's the kind of state we're in. Children cannot open bank accounts with some banks because their parents are deemed to be in some way dubious, although of course it's never stated what the problem with their parents is when those decisions are taken. Okay, so the new phase of the war on terror, just to say this explicitly, moves the duty to counter-terrorism from its traditional home in the counter-terrorism and security apparatus, police, the intelligence services, the military to some extent, and into the whole of the public sector. So as you know, it's now the duty of all public institutions, of people in this room, to spy on their children, spy on their students, or if they're in the case of hospitals, or dental practices, or opticians, or nurseries, yes, nurseries too, or in social work offices, all of these people in public libraries as well, of course, all of these people who work in these institutions now have a responsibility to try and prevent terrorism. So that expands the counter-terrorism apparatus right through the public sector in an unprecedented way. And that's a real step change in how things have operated. And that's had lots of significant effects. And we've seen in the press lots of stories about those significant effects in the last year. So the school child wearing a Palestine badge, the famous cucumber bomb example, where a child misspelt the word cucumber and was referred to prevent a channel. Huge numbers of examples of that. And these are just the examples which catch the headlines. There are thousands and thousands of people now being referred to channel, or even if they're not referred to channel, having sessions where the police are called to interview them over things that they've said or done, or things they've worn, places they've been. And of course, what's especially worrying about this, and this is in response I would say to those defenders of Prevent who say, well, many of these things that you're talking about aren't actually to do with Prevent or to do with channel. These are simply things that don't even get to the stage of channel, as if that means we shouldn't worry about those things. But what we see with this, with channel, is that because it's not required, technically, to go along to channel, to acquiesce in channel, what it means is, it's not a criminal process, it's a pre-criminal process. What it means is that the police are able to interview minors without an adult being there, without a responsible adult, without the parents being there, without even their parents knowing about it. So it's an incredible change in the relationship between the police and minors under 16-year-olds. So we're facing a really quite dramatic change and expansion in the powers of the state in relation to counter-terrorism. Now, I want to link this to the question of Islamophobia, and in particular to this concept which we've been using for the last year or so, the notion of the 5 pillars of Islamophobia, the notion that Islamophobia is not just something abstract that happens in people's heads, not just something which happens on the streets with attacks on Muslims or people who are presumed to be Muslim, but Islamophobia is a set of practices which systematically disadvantage Muslims and some others, mainly tending to be Muslims. And I don't want to talk about all this 5 pillars thing here, but I wanted just to talk about the main thing I want to talk about is the counter-terror apparatus. So it seems to us me and my colleagues who've been working on this, including Hilary Aked, Nazanin Massoumi, Tom Mills and others, that if you think of Islamophobia as being something more than expressed or held negative views about Muslims, if you think about it as being a question of systematic or structural disadvantage for Muslims, well then you've got to look at what are the main sources of structural disadvantage for Muslims. Is it attacks on the street? Is it the negative ideas in the heads of some white people, not all the white people? Or is it a question of the practices which disadvantage Muslims? And of course, those practices include people being beaten up, women having their hijabs ripped off, etc. But also, more fundamentally, the practices which most fundamentally and most obviously disadvantage Muslims are the practices of the state, and in particular, counter-terrorism and security apparatus, including, of course, all the stops and searches, ports, on the streets, the preemptive detentions, etc., etc. So our argument is that the state is the backbone of Islamophobia. So what we're seeing with the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act is the ramping up of state Islamophobic practices. So just to be clear about that. And then the second thing I would say about this is that the other thing we think about this is that there are a number of social movements from above, that is, social movements campaigning and acting in order to shore up or widen social inequalities. It doesn't mean people who are from the elite can be in a social movement from above and be from below in your social location. But the concept of social movement from above, it implies that one is involved in pursuing aims which either are widen class or gender or ethnic or racial hierarchies. So we identified 4 particular social movements which we think are key to or important in the spread of Islamophobia, and we wanted to do that not just because we wanted to say that the state is also there, but also because we wanted to say that it's not just the far right, it's not just the right on the streets, it's not just the attacks, it's those elements of the conservative movement which operate at an elite level to push government and policymakers in a particular, in a more and more authoritarian direction. I'm going to come back to this question of social movements from above when I talk about campuses and how that's affecting campuses. Of course, this is a campus which has been particularly involved in such things. So I don't want to talk any more really about that just now, but just to give that as some kind of context and background. Okay, so I mean, these are the particular elements of the counter-terrorism apparatus which systematically disadvantage Muslims, our racist policies in terms of their outcomes. And those are, of course, exceptional legislation, the Terrorism Acts, successive terrorism acts, preemptive incapacitation, that's what used to be called internment, now has various other names and titles, including the tagging process, etc. And then, of course, most importantly, perhaps, is the thing we know the least about, intelligence and surveillance, the role of the police and, of course, other public sector bodies, including perhaps individuals in this room, who are required to surveil others and to try and prevent them being drawn into terrorism. And so that's the kind of main elements of the counter-terrorism apparatus, I would say. And that's had, just in case you doubt this, right, just in case you doubt that Muslims are being discriminated against, here's some stats on that. So in 2002, Muslims were 7.7% of the UK prison population. In 2012, they were 13.4% of the prison population. I'm drawing, perhaps you might think, a rather crude line between 2002 and 12 with the war on terror. I had people say to me, it could be because there's all these Asian gangs out there, and I didn't really want to go any further with that kind of argument. By the end of 2014, there were 183 people in custody found guilty of terrorism-related offences, or the offences of domestic extremism, a comparatively recent offence. Of the 124 in jail for terrorism offences, how many of them were Muslim? 123. So if you're a terrorist in jail in this country, you're a Muslim. Whereas, on the other hand, if you are a domestic extremist Of the 59 prisoners classified as domestic extremists, 2 identify as Muslim and 53 as white. So there's a clear distinction made in sentencing, well, the whole process, right, in charging and sentencing between Muslims and non-Muslims. In practice, whether anyone in any of this process had any racist thoughts in their mind, and this is a question of practice. And I'm seriously making the point that lots of the people involved in that process might not be racists, might actually be anti-racists. Right? So it's not a question of ideas, it's a question of practices. I mean, ideas are important too. Muslims are, of course, 70 times more likely to be referred to charnel than non-Muslims. Pakistani, African, or any other ethnic minority groups, which includes Arabs, are disproportionately targeted under Schedule 7. So, for example, people of Pakistani ethnicity are over 150 times more likely to be detained under Schedule 7, such as reports, than a white person. So you can see that absolutely clearly there is a massive disproportionate attention to Muslims in state practice. And there's a word for that, and that's racism. Right? We should be scared of saying that. Right, now we go on to the terror threat. Overwhelmingly, people who are the terrorists in jail are Muslims in this country and in other countries. This is the Global Terrorism Database. This is a database compiled at the University of Maryland, just outside Washington, D.C., an institute just largely funded by the State Department, the Pentagon, and other US sources. So this is not a Trotskyist organisation, just in case you were wondering. This is a quite conservative organisation. There are all sorts of ways that you can pick holes in the methodology of what they do. They don't deal with state terrorism at all. What they kind of define as terrorism is arguable, but they do try to catalogue non-state terrorism and to work out prevalences. This is perhaps the best academic database for those things, with the caveats I just said. And you can see that in the UK, from 9/11 to 31st of December 2014, 573 terrorism incidents, 86% of which took place in Northern Ireland, and 14% in Great Britain. You all know what Great Britain is, right? Does everyone know what Great Britain is?
The island. The big island.
The big island. Yeah, and all the small Scottish islands too. That's right. Of course, it's called Great Britain because Scotland's part of it, right? Understand that? And it's great in the sense of being bigger, not as in fantastic. Right? Just to be clear. 10 terrorism incidents were attributable to Islamists in the UK since 9/11. 10. Okay. Less than 1.8% of all of the incidents in the UK, or 16% of the incidents in Great Britain, i.e. excluding Northern Ireland. There were also 13 incidents which were attributed to anarchists and set in Britain, and 7 attributed to Republicans. 15 incidents of Islamophobic terrorism according to this conservative database, including 14 bomb or arson attacks on mosques or Islamic centres. So you can see that there's an amount of terrorism the other way. As I guess the example of Thomas Mayer being sentenced in the paper today is an example of course, whether that's described as terrorism and whether what the crime is one of terrorism or domestic extremism is a matter for legal practice. Okay, now here's the stats. From Europol, and this graph, the one in orange, is done by Counterfire, which is a Trotskyist organisation, but the data comes from Europol and is supplied to Europol by all the home departments of all the EU members, including the UK. And this is the compilation from 2006 to 2013. Can anyone see a green sliver there? That's the proportion of all terrorist attacks in the EU done by what they call Islamists. My term is their term. 0.7%. 0.7%. Right. When you see that figure, it raises questions, right? You confront your presuppositions, or you go like, that can't be right, what does that mean, how do they compile the figures? If you want to ask questions about that, I can talk to you about that later. But those are the figures, right? And I can talk to you in great detail about this if you want. Okay, now, so the thing I'm trying to make there is that state practices are racist, and also that, that fundamentally in the whole orientation of counter-terrorism policy, you've got a fundamental imbalance between the actual threat and the ponderance of policy attention. Fundamental imbalance. Now you might say that there's good reasons for that, or that we should do, that there are important threats in the future, or look what happened in Paris, and we can say all those things and have a discussion about that. But that, the data doesn't support the idea that the most significant threat, the threat for generation, as David Cameron put it, is from Islamist terrorists. Certainly not in this country. Okay, so I want to go back to go on now to talk about how the counter-terrorism apparatus and legislation affects higher education in particular. And this is in a way, this is me talking about the general ambience and atmosphere, not just in terms of research, but in higher education in general, and of course that has its impacts on the ability and the freedom to do research, on the context of that. So, PREVENT is, as I mentioned, designated public institutions in schools, colleges, hospitals, dentists, opticians, nurseries, libraries. Don't borrow the wrong library books, I tell you. I was once involved in a court case where the person on trial was accused of having some bomb-making manuals. And there was 2 bomb-making manuals. Sorry, I digress, I really need to tell you where to stop. The person had these bomb-making manuals, and I was charged by the defence with looking at the manuals and providing an explanation of them. And it turned out that these 2 bomb-making manuals were just excerpts from a book which is widely published and is available in every bookshop. It's available online on the internet. It's called the Anarchist Cookbook, and it has that. People of a certain generation, perhaps my age, will know that also includes the famous recipe for drying the insides of banana skins and smoking to get high. It's in there as well. Fantastically useless piece of rubbish. And the prosecutors had, obviously, they don't know about counterculture, right? So they had no idea this was the Anarchist Cookbook, which you can get in every library has it. You can get it in every bookshop. But don't take that out if you're thinking that you might have political views which are slightly to the left of Tony Blair. Anyhow, so the requirement in PREVENT, right? You're legal people, right? So you know this kind of stuff. Is to have due regard, right? Due regard to prevent people being drawn into terrorism. Now that, of course, the policy conflicts in the way in which it's practiced with the other requirements that the other legal context in which we exist. And in particular, the conflict on academic freedom under the Education Act 1986, real interest in political freedoms under the Human Rights Act of 1998, and equality and diversity questions under the Equality Act of 2010, I think. So the question that you're faced in terms of higher education is, well, what difference does that make? How does PREVENT influence or impact on the other duties that we're under, and the space for academics and indeed students to engage in debate or research? How does it change the nature of the public university? So it's a question of the atmosphere in which we perform our functions. What kinds of pressures are there for us to, or are there pressures to not to do research certain subjects, not to have certain people speaking, etc., etc. And so that has an effect in a number of different ways. One, on knowledge production, on research, and the writing of research. 2, on the question of the civil society space, the democratic space of the university, on student democracy, on the question of free spaces. To what extent is the ability of student democracy curtailed by PREVENT? And then thirdly, the question of equality and diversity, the question of religious participation in practice, and the question also of multicultural democracy. To what extent does PREVENT interfere with or infringe the possibilities of those being conditions that can be actualised? And of course, we have a number of different actors here. we have the government counter-terrorism apparatus, the traditional counter-terrorism apparatus that we've been talking about, and their role in creating, overseeing, and monitoring PREVENT, the extent to which universities are complying with PREVENT. They've been required to report to HEFCE. HEFCE then communes with the Home Office, i.e. with MI5, and then will be a question of whether some universities are appropriately tackling extremism or not. Of course, the Prime Minister, David Cameron, did say that certain universities were not, including I think this university, properly challenging extremism. So you can see the pressure there is to implement the legislation there. The universities, there's the question of how the universities are doing that. Every university has to provide an action plan to HEFCE, a risk assessment to HEFCE, a whole series of new policies, freedom of speech policies, internet monitoring policies, research policies for handling materials supportive of terrorism, whatever that might be. And then, of course, there's the question of social movements and how social movements have responded to that. Obviously, the most obvious one is NUS, but there are others who are really quite important in this particular case, which I'll come on to. And these are, in particular, social movements from above. One of the things that PREVENT has allowed is it has emboldened or allowed or provided the entree onto campus for a whole range of conservative social movements who have come onto campus to try and close down the possibility of debate. And in particular, Student Rights is an obvious one, an organisation which doesn't believe in rights and doesn't involve any students at all, which is part of the Henry Jackson Society, the leading neoconservative think tank in the country, which is consistently does reports libelling and defaming universities, and especially university ISOCs for their practices. And then secondly, and this is perhaps more confusing for people, Right to Debate, which is an organisation set up by the Quilliam Foundation, itself a counter-extremism think tank set up with £4 million of government money in its first 4 years. And Right to Debate styles itself as being in favour of free speech, and that students should have a right to debate. Sounds good, right? But actually, what it's interested in is ensuring that there will always be a challenge to views with which it disagrees, i.e. views which are critical of government foreign policy. So it's actually in favour of constraining free debate rather than having the right to debate. So that's an interesting way in which that's happening. That's an active thing on campus. I don't know if our right to debate here on this campus. I don't mean in this meeting, it might be here in this meeting as well, but are they in this campus? No. They're very strong in Warwick, other places in Bristol, other places. And that's a Quilliam Foundation funded thing, and the Quilliam offer internships to students if they set up a right to debate societies on campus. So there's pressure from above in the sense of social movements from above being active on campus to try and close down debate even more than is being done by pressure from the state. Okay, so there are impacts of the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act on equality, democracy, academic freedom, which I mentioned already, and then the relationship also between the academic, between academia and the security establishment in relation to funding, secrecy of research, those kinds of things which I'm going to come on to talk about. There are questions of ethics and human rights, which I'll also be talking about, and then also questions of the quality of research and the evidence base. And then lastly, I'll finish off the talk by kind of a list of demands, things we should be demanding of universities, of the government, etc., and of our fellow academics in terms of commitments to ethical practice. So let me go on to say, let me just skip these slides, quality issues. Right, so this is one thing to say about the equality issues, is that it's clear, it seems pretty clear that the Equality Act conflicts. Right, so I will do this. So in the Equality Act 2010, there's a due regard, same language as in PREVENT, to eliminate unlawful discrimination, to advance equality of opportunity, and to foster good relations. Now, clearly there's a potential, if it's the case that PREVENT targets Muslims disproportionately, and it does, then there's potential that actually operating PREVENT is actually operating against the legal duty of universities to promote equality. And I think that's probably more or less what's happening in every university where there's a significant issue about this. And what the universities are supposed to do, it's not a legal duty for them to do this, but they're supposed to think about whether there should be an equality impact assessment. There was no equality impact assessment for the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act itself, and there have been very few equality impact assessments, none as far as we're aware so far, and my colleague Nazanin Masumi is working on this at present. So universities could have carried out equality impact assessments in relation to PREVENT, but many of them haven't. And of course we know that have been mentioning before that actually Muslims are being disproportionately targeted, that ISOCs, for example, are being disproportionately targeted over Christian societies or Hindu societies or whatever. And also we know, and I'm not talking about this very much, but if you want to ask me about it, I can tell you more, that PREVENT training in the universities tends to involve a series of ways of identifying extremism and radicalisation which are prejudicial, which are essentially racist. And that's, of course, contrary to the duty to show due regard to foster good relations on campus. So there's a whole series of ways in which the PREVENT duty is undermining the university's duty to foster equality. And that's not kind of a live issue, but it's an indication of how the space for debate and the ability of students, especially Muslim students, to function in a university in this country, well, in Great Britain, because of course it doesn't apply in Northern Ireland, so the university in this country, although of course Scotland's slightly different because it does it slightly differently, but so it is mainly in Great Britain I'm talking about. So there are a whole series of ways in which there are conflicts between equality duty and the PREVENT duty. I mentioned that, and then I'll go on just lastly to talk about academic freedom, the way in which these pressures have affected academic freedom. There have been a number of conferences cancelled. There's web filtering going on in some universities. Brunel, for example, filters the web. I noticed that Queen Mary doesn't filter the web in the sense that in Brunel, if you try and go on the Cage website, you can't. You can do it. You have to check it just downstairs. You can do it here. So it's not happening here. But there's clearly web filtering going on in some universities. We don't know what the basis of that is. We know from what we know of web filtering companies that the data which they use to assess what extremism is dubious and comes from conservative groups, including the Foundation, exposed in the press recently. And of course, there's the question of students and staff having to register materials, having access to materials. So at Bath University, there's a policy of staff and students having to register should they need to or wish to access materials supporting terrorism. Right, the university doesn't want to define what supporting terrorism is. It says, in the case of Bath, it says that terrorism is acts carried out by those organisations on the British government's prescribed organisations list. Right. How many are you familiar with? 174 organisations, I think it is, on that list. Well, of course, Al-Qaeda's on there, ISIS is on there, the traditional IRA, a whole array of Irish organisations are on there. Organisations not on there using political violence that are non-state groups, the FARC, the Zapatistas, a whole range of Latin American groups aren't on there, a whole range of European groups are not on there. So just to be clear, you are allowed to access materials supporting the FARC in my university, and that doesn't have to be registered. But if you want to find out about the PLO or the military wing of Hamas, Hamas is okay. You don't register that. The military wing of Hamas, you do have to register. So the university itself is not very clear what it's talking about, and that's just the question of terrorism. The question of supporting terrorism. What on earth is that? What would it mean to say you support terrorism? You can have a long debate about that, and we have been having a long debate in the union with the university about that. So there's all those questions. I didn't really mention the conference cancellation thing. I mean, just to mention briefly that there's been a whole series of conferences. The Conference of Zionism was cancelled. The conference was cancelled at SOAS here, wasn't it? There was a conference in Huddersfield I was supposed to be speaking at, this July, which was cancelled at the last minute as a direct result, as it turns out from FOI requests, of the local regional prevent coordinator, and the regional prevent coordinators run through what used to be BIS, the Department of Business Innovation and Skills. Quite a lot of them, more than half of them, are COPs. Some of them are the local authority prevent coordinator. And this conference was cancelled as a result of advice taken from the local prevent coordinator, a government official. They gave advice which resulted in the conference being cancelled. And as a result, the university now has a file on me which says that I need to, that I wasn't an extremist, but that, sorry, I need to explain this properly. Right? There's five or six of us from outside the university who were speaking, right? And they compiled a file on each of us. Right? And the files had to go through a checklist. Huddersfield has this checklist about whether you're an extremist or not. Apparently I'm not an extremist. And it comes to point 5, and the 5th point you've got to say, no, there's no problem here, is has this person ever attracted media attention in the past for their work? And it's like, oh, Miller has, shit. So I was ticked, right? So that meant that I had to put special measures, special risk assessment and avoidance measures in place, so that in case I said anything controversial, there had to be a strong chair, there had to be a commitment from the organisers that they would challenge any statement which wasn't supported for British values. And of course, it was pretty likely I was going to be one of those, I tell you. Since the concept of British values in Scotland is meaningless term. So anyway, the point is that these are conferences, this is a conference on racism, which was cancelled as a result of government intervention. And that's an extraordinary state of affairs, is it not? I mean, that didn't even happen under Thatcher, right? I mean, it's amazing that this stuff is happening. And these are just routine events now, and we'll see how that develops as we go on. Sorry, I'm taking far too much time. How much time have I got?
We're good on time?
Yeah, we're 14 minutes in.
Okay, right. Okay, so that's the kind of general ambience and atmosphere and the effects on academic freedom. I want to go on now to talk specifically about effects on research. And in particular, not just on, and that's the bit I've been talking about, is kind of effects on people who do critical research. So it's the kind of, what kind of things can you say, what can you not say, where can you speak, when can you speak. This is more, I want more to look at the way in which the state interfaces with academics who are not so critical. I'm not sure if I should use that phrase. I did a talk earlier this year in Leeds. Maybe I'll explain that when I come to it. Where, yeah, some scholars think of themselves as critical, but they may also be engaged in ways which I think is fundamentally unethical with the force of the state. So let's come to that when we come to it. Okay, so here is, has anyone heard of the DSTL? Remember what it is? The DSTL is the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, which used to be part of the MOD. It's the MOD's research capacity. It was hived off into a non-department of public body when all that was happening in the 90s. And then part of it was sold off to one of the big American arms firms. And the former, was she deputy head of MI5, became a board member. Pauline Neville-Jones was on the board, but anyway. DSTL is what's left. They have Porton Down, which is the German warfare experiment labs, and they have a number of other places. They do the kind of German warfare type stuff, but they also do a lot of research on social research, like psychological research, sociological research, on defence issues, including on terrorism. And they are keen to get to know academics. So they had this is a industry and academia engagement day. I went to one of the conferences at King's where they wanted to engage with us and try. The pitch is that they're working in the state and they've got to work under the kind of general provisions of the civil service in terms of secrecy and higher control. And so they want to find ways, new ways of understanding coercive violence. Because there's a problem here we've got to deal with. It's the kind of thing they say, and we need to tap other sources of information. We're vulnerable to groupthink if we don't do that kind of thing. And so they engage with academics. They fund academics all across the country. I don't know if they fund here, probably they do. And they are also engaged in research on propaganda, on social media, on understanding and interrupting social media. And here's a paper from 2011 written by Mandeep Dami, the Human Systems Group Information Management Department, DSTL. She's currently Professor of Operation or Decision Analysis at Middlesex University, so a proper academic. And she wrote this top secret report for DSTL in 2011, talking about what it's called Behavioural Science Support for JTRIG's Effects in Online Human Operations. Anyone heard of JTRIG? It's a Joint Threat Response Intelligence Group. Probably called something else now, it doesn't exist since it was exposed in this leaked paper from Edward Snowden. And there's some stuff on it on the internet. You can look it up. Look up JTRIG. It's part of GCHQ, the British Government Signals Intelligence unit. And so the Intercept has written about it. You can have a look at that. And these are slides from their actual PowerPoints that were leaked by Snowden. And so they're not saying that deception is something which is bad here. They are saying how we go about deception. That's what they do. They deceive people online. So they don't just, GCHQ doesn't just monitor the internet, it's also engaged in putting stuff on the internet. And you can look at all this. That report is it's quite a long report. They have a wiki with all the different techniques. Right, so yeah, I'm not going to talk much about that. But let me just say one more thing about that. So essentially, what they're engaged in is propaganda support for a whole range of government departments, including in particular on terrorism and political violence. And so they're engaged in populating the internet with fake Facebook and Twitter accounts and other social media accounts. They would say that they're doing this in order to catch terrorists. So they're in particular setting up honey traps, trying to encourage people to join ISIS or say that they're interested in joining ISIS, and then they can arrest them. Of course, when you see the relevance of this to an argument about what is the actual terror threat. So, let me tell you a story about this. So the Sunday Times thought it would be a splendid jape if they pretended to be young jihadis and tried to get recruited by what she called Jihadi Jane. Who she was. And so they tried to get recruited by Jihadi Jane by tweeting at her through her Twitter account. And at one point, she apparently told them in a private message, do it. At which point they were like, and they phoned the police. The police said, thank you very much, that's lovely. Didn't say, you pretend to be terrorists, that's against the law, we're going to arrest you. No, they didn't say that. They said, thanks very much, that's lovely. And then that weekend, what happened? There was all these stories about the lone jihadi, female jihadi on the streets of Glasgow who had been nicknamed by the security services Betty Bomber since she was going to kill the Queen on some anniversary, it wasn't it? About 6 months ago. And it then transpired that actually this was a Sunday Times thing. And the people who were on the loose were just the Sunday Times journalists. No, there wasn't actually anybody else there. So then the story kind of, fell apart a little bit, and the police were then saying, well, we don't know if there's a genuine plot anywhere, these could be fake accounts. And yes, of course they could be fake accounts, but I'm asking you to conjecture here. Is that Twitter account of Jihadi J actually the real, if there is such a person, Jihadi? Or is this kind of account, which you might suspect British intelligence operatives are running, and they can then spin that to good effect when the moment comes? If you look at the document there with all the techniques in it, they talk about how the difficulty of running fake Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, especially when someone goes off for the weekend and someone else takes over. It's like, grammar slightly different, and then the terrorists want to meet them, and they're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? so the whole question here about what's online, and when we hear about 800 people have gone to Syria, have they? And it's always advanced, these people have gone to Syria, therefore these people have joined ISIS, right? Or Al-Israel maybe, if you like. But how much of that is actual people going to actual places for good or ill purposes, to give aid, for example, or not? And how much of it is actually the fake profiles that are being populated, the internet's being populated by the security services, by, in this case, GCHQ. It's also the case, as I understand it now, from the police, what they call now, the special branch is now called SO22, is it? 25 or something. Anyway, whatever the special branch is now called. They're doing it as well. They're operating fake Twitter accounts in order to try and get convictions of people. So, when people say, so I'm suspicious, right? When people say to me, well, on the left, well, there are all these people in the Labour Party and on the left who are anti-Semites. I'm like, well, are there? But which actual people is this? And so the whole question about what is online is an open question, it seems to me, since there are not just British intelligence agents, but a whole range of other agencies trying to manage and manipulate. No doubt the bad people, as they call them, are trying to do the same thing. So I think we should be sceptical about that in the question of propaganda, and also sceptical about that on the grounds of thinking what the threat is, this generational threat which we supposedly face. Turns out in some cases not to be as much of a threat as has been suggested. Anyhow, to go on, right, so to ethical issues, right, this is an event I attended, when was this? January 2015, the ISRC event, where we've got this on the slide. Oh yes, here's the attendance list, and you can see just at the back, about at the top here, that this is all the academics who are all called professors something or other. Right? And then underneath it, there are a range of people called Charlotte H, Tom F, Jordan G, and whose names aren't there, and none of these people at the bottom have got affiliations. Doesn't say where they're from. And of course it wouldn't be my hand. Just ask. Who are these people that are at this meeting? It's the meeting on security threats and research. And someone in the audience, we're all sitting around tables, one of the academics said, oh, it's probably people from the security and intelligence agencies. So, oh, that's really interesting. Is it people from the security and intelligence agencies? And so the head of intelligence at GCHQ got up and said, yes. It's the guy, yes. And so we were there where these people were not disclosing who they were. So we didn't know who they were, we didn't know which agencies they worked for, we didn't know what they did. One of them said that they had, Jordan came over to the table, my table afterwards, and said, yeah, I've got a really recognisable name, So the ESRC was sponsoring a meeting where there were people who were not admitting who they were, who were intelligence agents. Now that's already a problem in terms of research. Research needs to be open. We need to understand who's doing things, who's there, what the roles are. Otherwise you can't form any judgment on whether one should work with them or not, or what that would mean. Now in this particular case, this was a meeting set up to investigate whether it was a good idea for the intelligence agencies collectively to put £6 million into a research centre on security threats. And they concluded at the end of the meeting that it was a good idea. They set it up. It's now based at Lancaster University. It's called the Centre for Research and Excellence on Security Threats, and it's a hub and spoke model. You've heard that phrase before, which means that they've got a centre there, but there's also other universities are part of it. My university is part of it, not through any involvement of me, just to be clear. But my university is also part of it. And this is a research centre. It's funded mainly, not entirely, mainly by direct funding from the Security and Intelligence Services. One of the things that was said at the meeting, which I endorsed at the time, was that this should be, if it's going to be an academic research, it ought to be run and managed by the ESRC and not by the agencies direct. And we've done that formally, but of course it is still an organisation which is run for the intelligence agencies. One of the things one of the questions that was raised in that discussion last January was whether how the agencies should interface with the academics, whether there could be internships from academics into the intelligence agencies, and whether there could be people attached from the intelligence agencies to the universities, and whether that could be or should be covert or not, whether they should have covert people pretending just to be ordinary researchers inside the universities. Now, I don't know what's actually happened, right? One of the people who was in charge of it, I was at a meeting with her, I said, is it all open? She said, well, yes, it's all open. But I think that's not true. When you look at it in some depth, as we have been doing, 4.35 million, sorry, not 6 million, from the UK intelligence agencies. So let me go on to I mean, so I think there's a fundamental problem with secrecy, right? Because the secret state is involved, and because they have the Official Secrets Act involved, some of the people, researchers involved, have to sign the Official Secrets Act. It's never going to be possible in a peer-reviewed journal article for them to say what exactly the role of the research sponsor has been. And that's a fundamental problem. We cannot be in the position of researchers not being able to disclose that they've had full control of the data, that they've not had any external influence from the funder over what they wrote, etc. So there's a fundamental problem with secret research, right? Not in general and in principle. But let's go on to talk about the specific issue. And here's the potential themes. You can see where it's being kind of surreptitiously over my camera. In case we didn't get to take the paper home with us. Okay, but here's some of the things they wanted. Understanding terrorist motivation, enhancing awareness of the culture and context of terrorist activities, understanding online and social media behaviour, goes back to the J-Trick thing, ways of enhancing analytical and investigative capabilities, possible interventions for human aspects of protective security. Anyone know what any of that is? Well, I just want to hone in on one, just invite you to share my vision of this, right? Ways of enhancing analytical and investigative capabilities for counter-terrorism, including developing new or existing analytical tools and techniques, enhancing judgment and decision-making tools, for risk assessment techniques for interviewing and evaluating credibility. What's that? Well, the key word is the word interviewing, right? What kind of interviews would intelligence personnel be involved in? Is there another word that you would normally use for that kind of? I was hoping we were going to get to interrogation first. Yes, torture, of course. That's what. And so essentially, these academics are doing research, which is in their mind, and when they talk about it, helping torture to be less bad, right? Maybe that's what they are doing. Maybe it's less bad to be tortured after this research has been done. Who knows? But they are essentially involved with the justification and support for torture. And does anyone? I said this at this meeting in Leeds I was mentioning before. There was an ex-intelligence agent in the audience. He went absolutely mental. He said, "What's your evidence the British government's engaged in torture?" I said, "Well, have you read Ian Cabeen's book about the history of British involvement in torture?" He said, "Well, I'm sure all the sources are really good in that." I said, "Well, yes, they are. They're government sources. You know? There is no doubt about this. The British government, all the way through this process, has been engaged in torture, not just in terms of the famous examples where MI5 agents go in and speak to the tortured person and then go out and then brief the torturers, but actually physically directly involved in torture. And we know this, right? But it's not polite to say so, but that is effectively what's going on here, right? There are academics in this country who are engaged in supporting the possibility and use of torture by the British and by other governments. And here's the way in which it's translated. This is the document from January 2015. This is their current website. This has been led by a guy at the University of Portsmouth on how to more effectively interview suspects. Okay. Just to conclude this section, I mean, this is not a new issue. You know, the issue of the closeness between the security and intelligence establishment and academics is one which was raised in a very great debate in the late 1960s. Here's the Daily Pennsylvanian about the CIA interview on campus. The CIA used to regularly interview on campuses across the US openly, and the student movement pushed them off campus. There were a range of CIA covertly funded and conservative foundation-funded think tanks and organisations on campuses across the US. Stanford Research Institute was one, the Centre for Strategic and International Studies at Georgetown, and the Foreign Policy Research Institute in the University of Pennsylvania was another. All of these were effectively pushed off campus by the student movement, either in the 60s or in the case of CSIS, eventually in the 80s. As a result of their hawkish research, their militarist agenda, they're funded by the CIA and by the conservative foundations. So those kinds of issues about the ethics of secret research, doing research on germ warfare to undermine the possibility that the rice crop could grow in North Vietnam, all those kinds of things were real live issues for student movement in the 60s and indeed in the 80s. So I think that there's guidance there for us on how people react to that kind of issue last time. And this is an issue which has returned to us. The colonisation of research capacity by intelligence agencies. Let's imagine that the intelligence agencies never break the law, right? Let's imagine that's the case. It would still be a problem since you can't actually examine the evidence base in which the research is founded. So there's a real significant issue with that, which I wanted to highlight. Okay. So I wanted to go on in the last part of the talk. I'm really going to finish soon. To talk about two things. One, the way in which, both of which relate to evidence-based in relation to terrorism. First of all, the ERG, which is the evidence base underlying the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act. And second of all, the question of radicalisation and the concept of radicalisation under research interests and agencies and bodies who engage in that kind of research and what their agenda is or their conflicts of interest are. So here's the ERG report which Cage issued recently, and essentially this is the basis of the notion of pre-crime, the notion that you can spot signs of radicalisation, and that's what students and staff in universities and other places have been trained about. How do you check out the signs of radicalisation? Now we haven't got time to go through this in detail, but essentially there's two things. One, first of all, is the question of secrecy. This report was done by some civil servants in NOMS, the National Offender Management Service, I think it used to be called the Probation Service, and they interviewed, first of all, 20 Muslims who were in jail for terrorism-related offences. Of course, it's not their fault they only interviewed Muslims, because there aren't any people in jail for terrorism-related offences who aren't Muslim. Well, that's one, right? But so it was only Muslims they interviewed, and they got from those interviews with those people a series of factors which might lead people to become radicals. Of course, that's first of all, fundamentally the wrong way of going about things. You don't take the kind of people who become the terrorists and say, what's the common thing? Well, they were all young once, so maybe it's being young that makes you a terrorist. Well, it's a ridiculous way of doing research. So first of all, the research is flawed in the first place, and they kind of admit that in it. Second of all, it's secret research. The original research was never published, has still never been published, and it's confidential. We don't know what the basis of the research is. We don't know to what extent the National Offender Management Service or the Home Office or MI5 intervened in the research or were involved in the research. We don't know any of that stuff because they won't tell us. So already a problem. A version of the research was published 5 years later in 2015. We still don't know. There's no statement in there, as it should be in relation to the ethical policies of most journals, of how the research sponsors were involved in the research, what kind of biases that introduced, no reflection on that. So again, a problem. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is the question of the limitation that in the research itself, the published version of the research, they say that one of the things that they overlooked as a possible explanatory factor and variable in radicalisation or extremism was the question of grievance. Now, although that came out of their interviews, they ignored it in all subsequent things. So the question of grievance in context was ignored by them, and they admitted in their write-up that that was a flaw in the research. Of course it's a flaw, it's the biggest, most obvious flaw, and all serious scientific literature refers to grievance and context as being part of the process of getting involved in anti-state or sub-state political violence. So the study is flawed from the beginning in being secret. The actual evidence base is not an evidence base, and it's the caveats that they have raised in the study themselves were ignored by government, who then put it in place in the Counter-Terrorism and Security Act, and that feeds through into all the kind of prevent training that we're getting in universities and colleges and other places, all of which is, in the end, frankly racist. The profiles people and Muslims and targets particular sorts of behaviour or views which have nothing to do with political violence, but are to do either with cultural, ethnic, or religious symbolism. So that's what I would say about that. And then to go on just quickly to radicalisation, I'm not going to talk much a lot about this, but essentially the concept of radicalisation is itself a deeply flawed concept, as almost everybody who's ever written about it acknowledges. Even those who want to try and use it acknowledge it's a problematic concept. And the most problematic thing about it is that it's a concept which was invented by the security and intelligence establishment after 7/7 and after the military bombings. And those who write about it, even those of the people who are not critical, acknowledge this, that it's not actually a concept which was invented by academics after research. It's invented by the security establishment. That's very clear. Yeah, this is Alan Schmidt. Alan Schmidt is not a radical, just to be clear about that. And here's John Horgan, who's the most critical of the mainstream terrorism authors on it. I'm not entirely convinced we should have allowed radicalisation to take centre stage. Our obsession with it has come at the expense of increasing our knowledge and the understanding of terrorist behaviour. The people who are most likely to write about terrorism, if you crunch the numbers on Scopus, are King's College London and the University of Maryland, also important there, which does the Global Terrorism Index. And here's the main centre in King's, which is the right radicalisation title, the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation, King's College London. And they're big fans of radicalisation, even though Peter Neumann, the director, is critical when he writes about it. He acknowledges some of the critical points, but he thinks that we ought to hang on to it and use it. But King's College London's ICSR is not an academic research centre. Well, it is an academic research centre in the sense that it's based in King's College London, but it doesn't come out of an academic review, it comes out of external funding. And it was set up in particular by Henry Sweetbaum, that's him in the picture there, with Tzipi Livni, the Israeli, was she Deputy Prime Minister at the time? Opposition leader at the time. And he put the money in. He had some money. He wanted to try and counter the academic boycott of Israel. That was his purpose. He went to LSE. LSE rather wisely said, "No chance, mate." And he instead went to King's, and he came up with a partnership with IDC Herzliya. Anyone know what IDC Herzliya is? Okay, IDC Herzliya is the only private university in Israel. It's just north of Tel Aviv. It's based in an Air Force base. It's very closely affiliated with the Israeli military and intelligence services. The 20% of the places for students are reserved for ex-elite military or intelligence service personnel. So it's not a disinterested academic body, just to be clear about that. And that's it. That's along with Sweetbaum, it's part of the setting up of the ICSR. It's set up for a particular political purpose as opposed to investigate radicalisation. That's it's not the launch, but the launch party they had at the Mall of Astoria in New York in 2010. That's that Sweetbaum there with Tzipi Livni, who herself has been alleged to be involved in war crimes in 2010 with the assault on Gaza. So a clear partisan agenda is ongoing here. And here are some of the people. Peter Neumann, the director, you know some of these people: Shiraz, Maher, Alexander Medinabu Hitchens, who of course is Christopher Hitchens' son, and John Bew, who probably you won't know, but he's the son of the historian Paul Bew, who's the Lord Bew, chair of the Public Administration Select Committee, I think, now. They all have neoconservative connections, of course. John, founding signatory along with his dad of the Henry Jackson Society. Shiraz, formerly at the Policy Exchange, new conservative think tank, and had written for the Gatestone Institute, which is frankly an Islamophobic organisation. Alexander also worked at the Policy Exchange and at the Centre for Social Cohesion, the Islamophobic think tank, which merged into the Henry Jackson Society in 2011, and has written for the Gatestone Institute. So there's a strong connection here between these academics and conservative think tanks, neoconservative think tanks. Both of them, both the Henry Jackson Society, strongly Islamophobic think tank, and the ICSR, being funded by the Atkin family, who used to own the Event baby feeding bottle company. They sold for $300 million in 2005, and they've given lots of money to both ICSR and to the HGS. And just to be extra clear about this, they've also donated to the Jerusalem Foundation, which is an organisation which is engaged in activities in occupied East Jerusalem in contravention of international law, although of course some would say that there's no such thing as international law and we can't talk about that. But that's the fact. Now, the evidence base of the publications, you might want to ask that question. Of course, it's not the same. You can't predict or discuss or analyse the evidence base or the worth of the publication by simply looking at the sources of the funding. That would be wrong. But when you do look at the evidence base, of 171 publications by King's College authors and Scopus, 7 were authored or co-authored by CSR staff members. So what we're seeing there is that much of their output is not in peer-reviewed journals, i.e. the ones indexed by Scopus. 2 have been cited more than once of those ICSR publications, so not well cited. And so the argument we make is that ICSR is more focused on activist sort of work rather than on academic work, and that's of course consistent with what we know with its why it was set up. So we've got essentially, concluding a field of knowledge production which is compromised, and which is compromised by funding arrangements, but also by the demands and pressures of the counter-terrorism and security apparatus. We've got knowledge produced by state agencies and political networks comprising of activists and intellectuals with close affinities and connections to the state agencies. And what we're seeing is effectively, I think I would say, is the use of academics to launder concepts to make them appear as if they're bona fide academic concepts. That's the kind of function, in the end, of these kinds of research institutes, to try and give some more respectability to the research or the ideas and the interests pursued by the security and intelligence establishment. I think that's really the function of those kinds of organisations, and it's helped along by money from conservative foundations who have similar sorts of political priorities. And then lastly, I wanted to conclude, we need to know who funds research, whether it's radical organisations or state organisations or intelligence organisations or conservative foundations. We need to know who funds it. It's absolutely clear in the medical and scientific research that one is supposed to disclose that. The International Committee of Medical Journal Editors has a very strict code, which is pretty good, but could be better. And there are codes for journal publication which are signed up by almost all peer-reviewed journals, but we still have the position of having secret research. Much of the research which is funded by DSTL throughout the country is not disclosed. We don't know. Some universities don't disclose it, so that it's actually impossible to know where the funding comes from. And therefore, what then happens is that it's not disclosed in academic journal papers, which is a clear ethical breach. That's the case in relation to security and intelligence issues. It's also the case in relation to corporate issues, to funding by Coca-Cola or Nestle or whoever else. So it's not just a question in relation to the state and the intelligence agencies, but also a question in relation to other vested interests. There should be no secret or covert research. It's not research if it's secret or covert. Universities have a framework of rights to protect the function of the university in its public capacity, academic freedom, equality and human rights. These should be supported and defended and extended against those interests and forces which would undermine them, by which I mean both the security and intelligence establishment and those social movements from above which try and pressure and intimidate students into being quiet or academics into being quiet. Who try, through like, the professor watch list, for example. Seen that? The attempt by social movements from above to intimidate students from being active or vocal, and to intimidate staff from speaking out, or indeed doing research on controversial areas. I've got my slide out of order. So the institutional structures to protect academic freedom and fulfil the ethical and professional standard of academic work, those need to be put in place. They're not currently in place. Most universities don't have provisions to protect academics from being attacked, to protect academics from undue influence, to protect academics from secret research. There's not really any proper ethical structures in place for that. There's tons of ethical structures for signing consent forms when you go and interview people, and in particular for signing consent forms and gaining consent when you go and interview ordinary people. But there's not measures in place in most ethics committees in universities to protect staff from powerful interests. And that's what's mostly needed in terms of reforms to ethics frameworks. And some ethical guidelines need to be updated, whether that's research councils or professional associations like the BSA or Law Society perhaps, or indeed in universities and other places. And we need protection for researchers against external threats, intimidation. I mean, all of us know someone who's had death threats or who's been subject to abuse and intimidation online. It happens in the real world too. There needs to be much more protection by universities, especially of threats from powerful institutions, from lawyers' letters, from corporations or state bodies or neoconservative think tanks. All of that is an important ethical agenda which the universities haven't properly even begun to think about. I think that's me. Thank you.